Rare Gem Productions proudly presents Entrepreneurially Thinking. Entrepreneurially Thinking is a presentation of BioSTL and CET, the Center for Emerging Technologies, changing the way you view new ventures and activating your entrepreneurial mindset, empowering you to create new pathways for business success in the St. Louis marketplace and beyond. Here's your hosts, Cheryl and Christy. Now let's get thinking entrepreneurially.
Welcome back to the Entrepreneurially Thinking Podcast. I'm Christy Maxfield.
And I'm Dr. Cheryl Watkins-Moore. I lead St. Louis's STEM Inclusion Initiative here for BioSTL. How are you doing, Miss Christy?
I'm doing well, and you?
I am doing okay.
Awesome.
It looks like we might be entering, spring?
Yes,
I think
that
we're
brief
in
little
it.
period of what they might call dramatic weather.
Yes.
If you're in St. Louis, if you want to call it spring, that's fine too.
All the April showers that we're getting.
And May flowers. So by the
Yes.
time you're listening to us, we'll probably be well ensconced into summer
Yes.
and complaining about the heat.
Exactly.
So enjoy us now while we're still mildly entertained by the weather as opposed to completely annoyed.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, we just keep rocking and rolling here. And the great thing is that with the support of our founding sponsors, CET and BioSTL, we can continue to do this for our 10th season.
Oh my gosh.
Which means that by the time we're done recording number 10, we'll have over 130 shows in the queue, which
That's
is really
amazing.
exciting. And we've just started working with ETHINKSTL.
Yes.
To have our shows come out through their link. You can directly listen, and then we'll be putting together some additional articles and other formats for you so that we can leverage their platform and that they can help us spread the word, and we can help spread the word about ETHINKSTL. So in addition to CET and BioSTL, make sure you're checking them out and following us and sharing all the social platforms that you enjoy. You can use the hashtags ETHINKSTL, eThink Podcast, Stay Listening. Find us on iTunes, Spreaker, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever you find your favorite shows.
So EQ, they must think we're special because we think they're special.
Well, yeah. Well, we had
That's
Jonathan
great.
on. We had a great show with
Yeah.
Jonathan. If you want to know more about what he's been working on. One of our former guests, Perry Drake, just had the big marketing conference here in St. Louis, and EQSTL debuted their leadership labs as part of that. So, folks we talk to are busy people.
They are.
Doing busy things. So we're excited.
Just as today, we've got a busy person.
We do. We're bringing
my
back one of our
gosh.
friends.
Yes.
We like to do this.
Season 1, we're going to get an update from this friend that's here today. So, by definition, all companies start out as entrepreneurial.
They do.
Of course they do. They
got to
have
start
to.
up somewhere.
Right. Along the way, though, success often forces them to change their focus to production. Then new competition, declining margins and revenues, and other external forces may suddenly require that the entrepreneurial spirit be fired up.
And the challenge there is the folks who had the entrepreneurial spirit the first time around probably aren't
Right.
there. And the folks who have been really good at making the company hum for the last 30 years aren't necessarily entrepreneurial.
Exactly. So our guest today inspires others with imaginative thinking as he shows leaders how to energize their organizations, helping them find new answers to old questions. So the question on the table is, does your business need some energizing? If so, and if not, still stay listening.
CET, the Center for Emerging Technologies, is a proud founding sponsor of the Entrepreneurially Thinking Podcast. We want you to know about all the great resources they provide, including the Square One Ignite and Bootcamp programs, as well as the online Startup Toolkit. The toolkit has videos, articles, and other materials to help you build your business. For more information about CET's programs, visit CETSTL.com. And for your renewed and continued support, CET, we say thank you.
Purpose First Advisors is proud to support the Entrepreneurially Thinking Podcast. Purpose First works with entrepreneurs and the organizations that support them to accelerate business formation, scaling, and transformational growth. For more information about how to work with Purpose First Advisors on business model validation, financial modeling, core messaging, or other growth and profitability strategies, visit purposefirstadvisors.com.
I'm Steve Epner. I'm an entrepreneur here in St. Louis, and I love to think outside the box. I love to help people find new ways to do old things because it makes us much better and sets us up for the future. And that, to me, is what entrepreneurial thinking is.
So joining us today is Steve Epner. You may recall from one of our earlier seasons that Steve has had a long and storied career here in entrepreneurship in St. Louis and working with clients all over the country.
He is a guru.
He is. And what I like is that Steve has a playful approach to business that has allowed him to create supportive mentoring communities throughout his career. So welcome back, our friend.
Thank you. I love being here.
Thank you so much for coming back. So you've just come back from Florida.
Yes.
Oh, what an amazing place.
Not just come back for 2 weeks, people. He was down there for like 4 months.
We aspire to be Steve when we grow up.
When I grow up, I want to be like you, Steve.
Well, I will tell you, it's much easier to shovel sunshine than snow.
I never understood snowbirding until I got to about 40. And then I was like, oh, this makes perfect sense.
Well, actually,
this is brilliant.
There are 3 levels. There are snowflakes, snowbirds, and frogs.
Okay.
Frogs.
Never heard of this.
So the snowflakes rent a place, and they go down for anywhere from 2 weeks to a couple months.
Okay.
The snowbirds buy a place, and they're anywhere from 4 months to a year. And then there are the frogs that are there till they croak.
Oh my God.
Awesome. So which of the first 2 do you fit into?
We are now snowbirds.
Okay.
Oh my
and
gosh.
we, like I said, we love shoveling sunshine.
That's wonderful.
It is so nice.
That's great.
So how are you managing your work with entrepreneurs around your extensive travel schedule?
Yeah.
Well, there are a couple things. First of all, we've got Skype and Zoom. So one of the things that I've been doing this last semester, I teach a class that's called Ideas of Mass Disruption.
Ooh.
I like it.
And I have a co-teacher, and what we do is I do every other week online from Florida, and then I fly in every other week so I can have time in person with the students.
My sister and I, we were teaching a class at Northwestern. That's exactly how we did it. I would fly in and then Skype. She was there. Right. So she managed it. That's a great, it's a change of how teaching is and how students get information.
Yeah, the whole world of education is changing. And as partially on the inside, and this is really entrepreneurial thinking, we've got to change the way universities work.
Yes.
You can no longer put out all your students with so much debt that they can never be productive citizens.
Sure.
So we've got to find new ways to do things. And if you look at the example of Purdue, they've been getting a lot of press lately because they have not had a tuition increase in 6 years.
Wow.
And they've got a program to make sure no student graduates with so much debt that they can't live.
Right.
And I think that's got to spread all across the country.
Yeah, I know UMSL does a lot on that end.
And then I don't know if you guys looked at 60 Minutes. I guess we can say this on here. They were highlighting NYU and their medical school. They are now tuition free.
Oh my! I hadn't heard that.
Yes, they just announced it, I think, this year, and because they started some time ago building up the
endowment.
Yeah, and now their focus is similar to what you're saying because many of these students are walking out with so much debt, and it's changing the direction of where these students are looking at practicing. Many of them have to go into these high-end specialties to pay off the debt.
Sure.
And we're lacking now doctors that are going into family practice or internal medicine because they can't afford it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that schools are being innovative and looking at how can we help and be centered around the student instead of the other way around.
And what I said is the schools have to become innovative. They're not all there.
No.
Even the ones that teach it aren't there.
For sure.
They have this one little corner that they call innovation and entrepreneurship, and the administrators don't have anything to do with it.
Right.
So it's sort of a shame, but...
Wow. Well, and so what is your feeling then, the thought of how we embed entrepreneurial thinking throughout different curriculums?
Yeah.
So this idea that the way you might learn art, say in your math class with tessellations, right? And the golden triangle and
tessellations.
Oh man,
that's a big word, isn't it?
I know.
That's
I gotta say, I was not really into math until they showed me how math could make art. Right? When we start to embed concepts in all the different fields they show up in versus just in a vertical where it lives in a silo. Do you see there being a movement towards
absolutely.
that?
And so I do lectures to the engineering schools about having an entrepreneurial bent because I believe an engineer who understands entrepreneurship can write their own ticket. They can do
sure.
anything.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're trying to encourage engineering students to take more business. But they don't necessarily want to because business is messy. Okay. And engineers are structured.
You're married to one, right?
I am, but I think like we wouldn't have Silicon Valley if engineers hadn't been
Correct.
entrepreneurial because it was actually teams of people leaving other companies to go start their own.
And that, by the way, you just said one of the key words, team.
Yeah.
People think there's this myth of the single entrepreneur who goes ahead and creates Hewlett-Packard.
Right.
It's Hewlett and Packard. It was a team.
And a whole bunch of other dudes.
Right.
Right. No, it takes a lot to be entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
And the reality is most entrepreneurs, sort of like most doctors, aren't very good business people. They're dreaming of the future and they don't necessarily understand production and administration.
Right.
And so you need to bring in people with different personalities in order to succeed. If, a team that all looks the same and thinks the same is guaranteed to fail.
Absolutely. They're
Okay.
going to play to each other's weaknesses as much as to each other's strengths.
Right. And they all think the same way. So if you're all in production and you get lots of stuff out, but you never bill for it.
Exactly.
How long are you going to stay in business?
30 days.
Or you got all the great equipment and you know how to run a line optimally, but you're not putting any new ideas into the pipeline. You have no new product development.
Right. And even if you do, the classic story, which we talked about in season 1, I think it was Kodak.
Right.
Kodak got put out of business because of digital cameras, and Kodak kept believing that the future of pictures would always include film.
Exactly.
And so they didn't need to be in the digital camera business. The amazing thing is they are the ones that invented the digital camera.
Yeah.
And the thing that keeps them in business is you can't make a digital camera without paying them a royalty for their patents. But they couldn't get that passed. They couldn't get it past the heads of the business who were so sure that their ability to make good paper film was what would keep them going to the future.
They're not looking at the market and the changes. They're not looking at where the market, where the customer. Obviously, you're not talking to customers. So I think that you can see that fallacy in a company that's already running, and we see it with emerging entrepreneurs. The first question we ask, have you talked to a customer?
Yep.
Yeah.
Who's going to buy it?
Who is going to buy it?
And we make all of our students in our entrepreneurship classes here go to Venture Cafe and try their idea on 5 strangers.
Awesome.
And they come back and we get comments at the end of every semester. That was the best thing you made me do. I was so uncomfortable, but I learned so much.
Yeah.
And it's an eye-opener because, our past success can blind us to the future.
Absolutely. And that's a friendly audience to go to.
Very friendly.
It's an audience that thinks outside the box. They're there because they want to hear about innovation or be in that space.
And they're drinking beer and wine.
Yes.
Right. So you got to find that in whatever community you're in.
Yes.
Find the community where
Go to
really
the
everyone
bar.
is everyone's actually oriented to support entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial thinking, right?
And by the way, that's one of the things the students are most afraid of. They say, well, these are all entrepreneurs. If I give somebody my idea, they're going to run with it.
Yeah, we've heard that too.
We hear that
But
all the time.
There are I give out ideas all the time. And the reality is the difference between 99% of the population, the entrepreneur, is the entrepreneur does something with the idea.
The execution.
Everybody else dreams about it.
Right.
So your students, I've had the pleasure of teaching at the university level as well. And one of the challenges I really find is students are very focused on grades. And I'm very focused on teaching them to think in a new way. Right. And you mentioned that students were afraid someone would take their idea. So how do you generally source the students who are in your class? Are these folks who feel like they're going to start a business or they're mildly interested? Or are you giving them ideas? I'm just curious on your pedagogy around that because
there's another one of those big words.
Like, wow.
Hey, I got them today.
Yeah.
You got to use them when
They're
you got
just
them.
flowing off her tongue like that.
Well, I'm much simpler than that. So the first thing is I only like to teach grad school and I only teach electives. So the students want to be there.
Yeah.
All right.
But then we teach one class, which is corporate entrepreneurship, which is how to be entrepreneurial within an organization.
Absolutely.
We teach another one on how to start a new business. So the answer to your question is sort of depends.
Okay.
And we start out with everyone sort of like I don't know if I'm really creative enough to do that.
Sure.
So the first thing I have to do is teach them that they're creative. So we do a very simple exercise, which you can steal.
Excellent. I'm writing it down.
Okay. You put them together in groups of 4 or 5, and you say, okay, I'm going to give you a problem, and you only have 60 seconds to solve it.
Time pressure.
Right. Well, that gets you to concentrate your thinking. A lot of people get sidetracked. So I say, you need in the next 60 seconds to come up with 10 new ideas for Kleenex, go. And then I'm quiet. And the room explodes into noise, which is great because now there's energy there. And they're all thinking and yelling. And in the end of 60 seconds, they all have these crazy ideas, some of which are a little obnoxious. I mean, the one of the ones I liked was Kleenex that changes color when you blow into it. So the kids will be excited about using it. Okay. That's good. That's good. I had another group come up with the idea of repackaging it in cylinders so that during hay fever season, you put that in your cup holder and the Kleenex box won't roll around the floor.
Well, that's true. I've done many a maneuver to try and reach a Kleenex.
But the thing is, all of a sudden people realize, I can be creative.
Absolutely.
So that's step number 1. You've got to convince them that they belong in the class and that they can participate. And then step number 2 is now you just have to help them take ideas and learn how to develop them. Right. Don't be afraid. I mean, there's the old saying, we send our kids to school as question marks and we graduate them as periods. We beat the creativity out of them. Right. So we got to go back and teach them it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to have crazy ideas. Matter of fact, one of my favorite examples, because I do this for a lot of businesses, and I tell people, crazy ideas. I want the craziest idea. So I was with a hard goods distributor who provided product for job sites, construction sites. He said, well, you want crazy. I want a transporter beam. I said, okay, why do you want a transporter beam? Well, when somebody breaks a saw blade or a drill bit on a job site, they're shut down until they can get another one. If I could get it to them faster, I'd have a competitive advantage. So we talked a little bit, and I finally came back to him. I said, I've been thinking about your request there. How about if I can get close to a transporter beam? He said, what do you mean? I said, I got an idea. And this was about 6 years ago. Uber had just started. I said, why don't we get a couple of the Uber guys to park outside the door here? And anytime somebody calls from a job site and says, hey, do you have this drill bit? We just broke ours. We'll say, yeah, we have it here. It's $14. I've got an Uber sitting outside the door. We can have it to you in 7 minutes if you'll pay the $3.45 for the delivery. Every time they said send it. All of a sudden, this guy started taking business away from everybody else because it was like instant response.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. So the crazy idea in reality couldn't be done, but we could get close enough that we accomplish the purpose. And once people get used to say, well, I can use a crazy idea, then all of a sudden we almost have too many. And it becomes, well, then the big problem is not what you can do, but what you should do. Right. So you can focus and concentrate on the ones that will give you the greatest competitive advantage.
That's what I was going to ask you about when you talk about corporate and you help these corporate entities or think differently and think entrepreneurially. The experience that you have, you gave a great example there. When we come back, what are some of the challenges in working in those type of environments?
You got it.
BioSTL is a proud founding sponsor of the Entrepreneurially Thinking podcast. We want you to know about all the great things they are up to, including the BioSTL STEM, Entrepreneur Inclusion Initiative, and Fundamentals program for early stage would-be entrepreneurs in the life sciences in St. Louis. You can learn more about all of BioSTL's programs by visiting biostl.org. And for your renewed and continuing support, BioSTL, we say thank you.
I'm Mindy Mazer. I'm the Executive Director of Brazen St. Louis, and entrepreneurial thinking to me means no ceilings. And no ceilings means blue sky, making sure that we can actualize on all of those big dreams and big business ideas in our blue sky.
Steve, you were talking about how once people tap into the fact that they can come up with a crazy idea and the crazy idea may not be as crazy as they think, that then the challenge becomes essentially idea selection, not what you can do, but what you should do. How do you help folks make that decision?
Well, first you have to get them out of their traditional, Well, we've never done it that way.
Right.
Or we've always done it this way. John
we
Long,
tried that 40 years ago.
Right.
Well, with technology, if you say we tried that 6 months ago, you gotta be willing to step back and look. So one of the things we do is I have a group usually that I'm working with, and I come up with the whiteboard and I say, I want to list all of the killer phrases that you use in the company to stop ideas. And we've always done it this way. IT won't let us do it.
Right.
It's not in our standard procedures.
The CEO will fire me if we do it.
Right. And then we have all of these listed on the board. And now during the day while we're doing the work, if anybody uses one of those phrases, they've got to put $1 in the pot.
Ooh, that's an expensive proposition.
Oh, no, it gets even better than that.
Oh.
Because I was doing this with a board of directors, and it was $20.
Oh,
and,
well, you have to scale appropriately.
Right. Well, somebody had made a suggestion, and this guy he was a chairman of the board. He had been CEO. And he's like turning red in the face, and you can see the veins in his neck. And he finally reaches into his pocket, stands up, throws a $20 bill on the table and says, we tried that before and it didn't work. And we all had a good laugh. And then we worked through why is today different?
Why didn't it work?
What's changed? Well, in one case, I saw a company that had tried to use CDs to have catalogs. Well, it didn't work the first time because you had to pay extra to get a CD drive. Now, of course, nobody has CD drives again because you have to be willing to evolve. And sometimes you have to look at what's happening in the environment. What has changed? Because that's where people get tripped up. They keep thinking that this is like the olden days where you could come up with something and it'd be good for 10 or 15 years.
Technology is moving at the speed of light. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, understanding how that can feed into your business and how that can change.
Oh, and it changes
business.
so rapidly. Matter of fact, I love going to conferences, and I heard this one guy who was a futurist. And one of the things he said, the Tesla. Yeah. He said, that's not a car. That's an app on wheels.
For sure.
And I thought, what a great description.
That is.
And, the car, every time they want to make a change, they download software. You don't have to take the car in and get it worked on. They download new software.
Right. Well, I wouldn't know about that because I don't have a Tesla.
Well, somebody said, it's because people buy that car because they're environmentally friendly. I said, no, if they were environmentally friendly, there's 6 other cars they can buy and they can drive off the lot tomorroh. This is about status.
Yes.
This is about experience. This is about technology.
Because they can do a Prius and be...
let's get that.
They can actually walk, ride a bike.
There's so many other ways that they can accomplish that goal. So this way of thinking where you said, we have to get out of the idea that things are going to be good for a longer period of time. We have this transient competitive advantage, right? What does that mean when you're putting young people who are coming out of the programs you're teaching at the university level into the, so young people into old companies, essentially?
Well, sometimes they run into roadblocks and just quit.
Right.
Okay. So part of it is helping young people understand how to work, I hate to say, with
old people.
More mature people.
Okay. Greater tenure. They have a longer tenure.
Okay.
I got to tell you, after 70, you're never going to use old again.
No,
you don't want to.
And old is really, to me, a state of mind.
That's a whole nother show.
It is. Yeah.
But it's true. I mean, that's why I still teach. That's why I still consult. I don't feel old. I don't act old. You can ask, anybody who's seen me at the bar. But the idea is that's part of what you've got to bring back into corporations, a sense of fun. Yeah. Because many companies have become just a productivity engine.
Yes.
And that's all they want to do. They produce their bottle of water. They produce their carpet. They produce whatever it is they produce. And they've got it down to a science. When you change things, what's the old saying? The only person who likes change is a wet baby. So I
think you and Dan Rather are now in the running for eclectic phrases.
But the thing is, we've got to have more wet babies. Yeah. I mean, you've got to convince people that they're uncomfortable with the status quo, so they'll look at the future. They'll look at the differences.
So what are the type of, when they reach out to you as a company, because I asked you earlier about challenges and working with some companies, but why are they reaching out to you?
Well, because one, they know they're stuck, and I've got a reputation for helping people get unstuck. But I always interview them before I accept the job because there's some companies that won't unstick.
Right.
I mean, they just they're so plastered. And I don't like failure. So if I can walk in And they'll say, what do you mean you won't take this job? I said, because you guys are going to fail. You're never going to listen. You're never going to get behind this. This is sort of the flavor of the month club. And you want to tell your boss that you're being innovative, and just tell them that. I don't need to waste my time doing it.
What kind of discovery questions help you assess that?
Yes.
So my 2 favorite questions, and by the way, I have a book out. It's called Simplify Everything. Get your team from do-do to done-done.
Yes. Yes, I remember do and done.
Yeah.
And I'll do the same thing I did last time. I'll get you an unlocked Kindle version, and you can give it for free to every one of your listeners.
That
always
is
been
wonderful.
so generous.
Thank you.
So the 2 questions that I ask in the book: what is the dumbest thing you did today, and what is the most difficult thing? And the answers to those 2 questions will lead you to so much opportunity to innovate within a company. And once they get successful and find out that little ideas can make a big difference, all of a sudden they're willing to look at their markets.
Going back to what Christy asked, is that how do you differentiate the company that you're going to take on versus someone that you say, you all are not ready?
It's sort of gut feel from interviewing.
Okay.
You can tell the people who are stuck in the mud, who've got their head up somewhere and they don't see the light of day. You just know that.
Right.
Sure.
And if they don't laugh at my jokes, you know that.
Well, that's a given.
Because they're too uptight. And you've got to be loose. You got to be willing to think. You got to be willing to break the rules. And you got to be willing to fail.
That's the whole thing about thinking entrepreneurially, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you're afraid to fail, don't get started.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you won't get started.
No, you won't, because you're going to be afraid to fail. And so you're going to study it to death. And finally, the idea will be gone.
Right.
Analysis paralysis.
And
Absolutely.
so generally, when somebody calls you in, it's probably somebody in the C-suite who's made the decision it's time to be innovative and entrepreneurial.
Correct.
Organizations are big, though, and they've got lots of different layers and lots of different people. How do you approach that from an organizational level? Is it, do you start at the top? For those who actually make the cut and make your, get through your interview process, how do you do that where there's lots of different layers you need to touch?
So it depends on the size of the company. My preference nowadays, I've reached a level where I very carefully pick and choose who I want to deal with. So I like to deal with the smaller companies, under 150 employees, because I can have more impact immediately.
Right.
And then my job is to first convince the C-suite to let me work with the line people, because the C-suite doesn't have the ideas.
Right.
They have vision and direction, but it's the people on the line, the people who touch the customer every day. That's where all the new ideas are. And so I have to get their permission to work with the people that are going to make me look successful.
Right.
And this is the funny thing. All of the ideas come from their people.
Absolutely.
I'm just the facilitator, but they think I'm some kind of genius because when I showed up, the ideas came out. And all
nobody was asking before.
Nobody was asking. Nobody was listening.
That's it. Nobody was listening.
And nobody had a process with which to do any of it.
They'd ask the question, say, okay, thank you, put it in the suggestion box, never look at it again, and say, okay, we had our meeting and we got a bunch of ideas, but they're not really any good.
Right.
I take the ideas and we incrementally test them. Nothing's going to work the first time. So you try it. You find out what went wrong. You learn from it. You try it a little differently. Iteration. And finally, you start to hit things that make sense. And then you hit your sort of minimally viable product or process, whichever it is. And then you go with it for a while. And you can come back in 2 or 3 months and say, okay, now what else did we learn? What can we do better?
I love the fact that you go down to the line people, because you're right. People ignore those folks as well as salespeople. Salespeople are touching your customer all day long, and they see what the issues are. They see what the challenges are. If you put salespeople and product development together, oh my God, you can come up with
amazing things.
Yes.
In fact, for any of your salespeople or young people who are in the C-suite and happen to be out on a sales call, the 2 words that you want to listen for when you're talking to a customer are I wish or I want. Whatever they say after those 2 words is golden.
Yes.
And take that to your production and product people. If they can satisfy a wish, people will buy it.
Absolutely. And a lot of customers, as we know, they don't even know what they want. But one of the great things I used to do with when I had a marketing team who at this one company, they had never been out with a salesperson before, which I was like, how are you creating strategy? And you've never walked in their shoes. You've never been in front of a customer, right? So I made them. I was like, you have, I don't care if you do it all in one time, but you got 12 times a year to go out and ride with these reps, because you will get so much information.
Absolutely.
And watch the workflow, because a lot of times customers don't even know what they need. If you watch what they're doing, they invent something because there's not that, whatever that is there.
And when you ask them, what's the toughest thing you do? They'll say, well, we have to do all of this workaround stuff because this won't do X, Y, or Z.
Exactly.
Right.
You also said one thing that I'd like to pick on very quickly, because a lot of engineers, and I started out life as an engineer, so I can say this, engineers will go to the customer and say, here is what you need.
Right.
People buy what they want, not what they need.
Exactly.
I need to lose weight. Until I want to, it ain't going to happen.
Amen to that.
Right.
No, that's great.
And so that's a really tough lesson for a lot of people to learn, because they don't like to ask that question.
Right.
And are you typically, when you're working with a company, actually working on bringing specific product ideas to market? Or are you doing more general about increasing their capacity to think entrepreneurially and then letting that unfold? Or is it a mix of both?
It's a mix, because one of the things I always try to do is work myself out of a job. I don't want them to be reliant on me. So I want them to learn the process so they can continue to do it themselves. But one of the things that happens is the first time you give people a chance to think and to dream, you get 100 ideas. And so then you have to work through what are the ones that make the most sense. Because you just can't,
ones.
right. And sometimes you don't know. So we'll pick 4 or 5 and we experiment with them. And that's fun. And once people start succeeding, it's amazing what happens, because they've been so afraid in the past to try that they don't know what success looks like.
And that could be the climate of the organization.
Oh, it always is.
Who's like, if you fail, you're out of a job.
You're fired. No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
Which is a great way to be, inspiring people to be creative.
Which is one of the things that's fun for me. I go into these places. They can't fire me. I'll quit before they fire me.
Right.
I don't care anymore.
Right. I mean, you don't like the answer? Okay, fine.
That's fine. I don't care. And so that freedom of thought is very important. But young people are terrified of that because they're afraid to be fired.
Interesting.
Because they got so much debt.
Well, but I also would have thought they had the most freedom because they figured, the world is their oyster, right? And
that goes. I think I have found that you never know more than you did when you were 22.
Oh,
you never know more than you did at 22.
Because at 22, you knew everything.
At 16, I got a 16-year-old who
knows
is a genius.
Everything.
As my husband and I call him, you're just a genius.
You've solved all the problems.
You know everything.
They really do. They really do.
Boy, genius.
Yeah.
And so overcoming that hurdle of not actually knowing everything at 22.
And so
or
they,
16.
sometimes at 22, they're out there and they're willing to try anything, but they get beat down so quickly.
Yeah.
And then they're afraid of anything because now they've got a spouse and they got 2 children and a house and a car and debt up the wazoo.
Right.
And okay, I can't afford to lose this job.
This is where we started the conversation.
Absolutely.
Right. Debt and education.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you find then that older adults are more willing to be entrepreneurial in the way they approach problem solving?
It depends on the individual. Some people have grown up so long in such a straitjacket that you can take the straitjacket off and they still have their arms wrapped around their body.
Right. They know no other way to be.
No other way to be. But some just love the freedom and they can be your greatest assistant at trying to get change because they have the ear of the C-suite, because the C-suite knows this person knows where everybody is and how everything works.
What I think was also interesting, we see many people think that the age of the entrepreneur, especially in our environment, is like that 20-year-old. Actually, we're seeing people who are mid-career or at the end of their career and now trying to do something differently.
Well, it's absolutely, I'm on my 3rd retirement. I keep flunking retirement. It's no fun just sitting around the house.
Yeah.
And friends of mine who have retired and sit around have gotten old and died.
I was going to say they're dead.
For sure.
So that's why I try to stay very active. I want to stay engaged. That's why I do mentoring. That's why I do consulting. That's why I do teaching. Yeah. I sit on all these different boards. I'm a docent at the Danforth Center.
Oh, my gosh.
Well,
you know what they say, 70 is a new 50.
Yeah. Except when I'm trying to get out of bed in the morning. Those first few steps in the morning, you know that you're 70.
Just will yourself. Keep moving.
Keep moving. You have to keep doing that.
Yes.
So as you continue to stay involved, are you seeing any trends or themes either in how corporations are approaching entrepreneurship or what it's meaning to be entrepreneurial in 2019 versus what it meant to be innovative in 2020?
Everybody wants to. Okay, so it's always like a chairman's initiative, and we got to do something entrepreneurial. We got to do something innovative, and there's a lot of talk.
Yeah,
not a lot of action.
Yeah,
okay,
because the action is scary.
It's scary. It costs money, and you have to take a risk that you can be wrong. And those who do take the action come out way ahead. Those who don't fall behind. I mean, look at a guy like Bezos with, he started out just selling books online. Yeah. Now he sells the world online. Exactly. He's disrupting one market after another, and everybody's scared out of their minds by him. And he's actually doing the same thing over and over again, but he's gotten so good at it. And people who try to ignore him do at their own peril. Yeah. And that's why there's so many companies that are going out of business and they're shutting down their brick and mortar stores. Right. So what's he doing? He's opening up brick and mortar stores. Yeah. He is a contrarian. Right. And he's the richest man in the world, so you can't say he's wrong. Yeah.
We can. It's just there's not a lot of empirical evidence right now.
Right. He maybe didn't too good at personal relationships, but the reality is, he has been very successful at changing industries.
Absolutely.
So if folks want to actually move from just talking about it to doing it, one of the ways is to get your book. Remind us again of the title.
It's Simplify Everything. Get your team from do to done.
I love that.
Because we're always doing work because it makes us look busy and maybe we'll get promoted, but done gets you promoted.
But also do too. You could be working on do stuff.
Right.
And that's not good.
I'll give you a simple example of that. I had a president of a company who signed all the checks for accounts payable. And I said, why do you do that? He said, well, that's how my dad taught me to do it. And I now know where all the money's going.
Really?
I said, but look at this pile of checks. He says, I know, but I'll get through them. I said, yeah, I'm watching you while we're talking. You're signing checks. You're not even looking at them. So why are you signing them? Silence. Dead silence.
Right, you don't actually know where all the money's going. Right. Look at your financial statement.
Well, that's what I said. Look at the.
Why do I need to sign checks to know where the money's going?
Well, I said, since you don't ever refuse any, why don't you let your CFO, at the time it was a controller, sign them? Well, I don't know if we could. I said, let's try an experiment. Give them only checks under $500. Yeah. He said, well, okay, we'll try it. Well, we tried. That took care of about 70% of the checks on his desk. This is fantastic. And so pretty soon we moved the number up. So now he only sees checks that are for over $10,000. And nothing is stuck on his desk. Right. Nobody's waiting for him. Nobody's complaining you haven't signed the checks.
But you freed up his time.
I freed up his. But more than that.
And his mind share.
Well, I also freed up the workers' time. This was one of those dumb things. I have to go in and bother him 4 or 5 times to get the check signed so that we can get new product because people say we haven't paid the bill. Right. So we've saved all kinds of time. It was one of those dumb things, and we just fixed it.
Hopefully he wasn't signing people's paycheck, and they had to wait.
That's a whole other story.
That was a whole different story.
So we're going to move from do to done. And if folks want to find you online, where can they find you?
You can find me at thestartupwithin.com.
There you go.
Awesome.
And if I can, one other thing.
Yes, please.
St. Louis University has a program called SLU Start. And this is for the community, although it does help if you have some kind of connection to SLU, a parent, a guardian, a third cousin, twice removed. and it's a free program to help people start businesses.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's great. And thanks for plugging it.
Yeah. And you can find that online. The application's online, and it's called SLU Start, SLU START.
Wonderful. Well, now you have all sorts of ways to get and stay connected with Steve and find out more about what's going on in the St. Louis entrepreneurship community. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you for coming back.
My pleasure. Have me back faster.
Okay, we'll work on it. Or, we may have to just go to Florida for an on-site interview.
That sounds even better. I would be glad to host you.
Awesome. We're penciling that in for, I guess, maybe season 12.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Fantastic. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for coming back.
Changing the way you view new ventures, unlocking your creativity and innovation, igniting your thinking about entrepreneurship. It's Entrepreneurially Thinking. Get connected and discover more. Visit entrepreneuriallythinking.com to listen to all your favorite episodes and learn more about our guests, hosts, and sponsors. Feeling inspired? Be sure to share your thoughts, questions, and stories in the comments section. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. The best way to show love is to share and subscribe. Let everybody know that you're entrepreneurially thinking.